The opportunity to wake up in the morning and look out over the Olympic Mountains, look over the Straits of Juan de Fuca, and just breathe in that air. That, in and of itself, I can't believe I might get teary-eyed here. Holy cow. Just a second. That, in and of itself, is one of the most incredible experiences, to just wake up and go, I can't believe I live here. And they're paying me to live here. They're paying me to go to school here. Are you kidding me?
Royal Roads, in a word, was a magical place. I remember once standing on the patio of the castle here. It was 7:30 in the morning. I was standing with a cup of coffee, gazing down across the lawns towards the lagoon. There was a hint of mist in the summer's air, and a platoon of cadets in their scarlets was marching down to the parade square with a small little contingent from the band drumming away. And I remember thinking how truly magical Royal Roads was. And it was an enormous privilege to teach here. And I used to say to my students what an enormous privilege it was to be here.
So lots of the other guys that were going to go there, and so all male in 1974 when I started, they had been picked up by Canadian Forces aircraft flying across the country. So starting in the east in Newfoundland, traveled across, picked up more candidates, filled up that aircraft. Last stop for the plane was in Vancouver. Everybody got off the plane in Vancouver and got onto a bus.
We all have such vivid memories of being on the ferry and getting off the boat. And it was nighttime when we arrived on the bus, and you pull up to the upper circle, and this very scary fellow, big burly guy, and a couple of them actually in their scarlets who had accompanied us, get on the bus, and there was no love lost. Telling us exactly what we were expected to do. And I remember that night as vividly as anything.
Nobody knew everyone else. You're all sort of carrying a suitcase or some bag and not quite knowing what you're getting yourself in for.
There's this click and this sound of feet marching, drill boots coming up Neptune stairs. And you can't see them, you can just hear them, and they're echoing off the castle. What we didn't know later was there are staff and staff families on the roofs of the buildings looking down at us. We thought we were alone out here, and there's this really ominous noise coming at us. And at some point, they would give us instructions, and then all hell breaks loose to grab your luggage, and screaming and yelling at us and telling us where to go, and up to one flight of Nixon's block, and we don't know where that is, what that is. Go here, go there. Up to our rooms, and everybody gets in and sorted out and settled in different rooms and told. And finally, I still remember getting into bed and the goodnight song with these huge speakers they'd rent for 4 weeks to blast these songs through the building. And every flight had a different song. Ours was Dreamweaver. I remember that because I can't hear it since and not remember these things. And I still personally remember thinking in bed, looking out the window going, I am exactly where I want to be.
dislocated, which is, what recruit terms are intended to do. You're dislocated. You have to find new ways of making friends and forming bonds and solving problems that you didn't know were problems up until then. I didn't know that I'd been folding my socks the wrong way my whole life. And so those things get pointed out to you.
Well, my flight, our second years would actually come in and check on us to make sure we were in our beds. And I know that sounds kind of strange, but otherwise we would be sleeping on top of the bed so we wouldn't destroy them. And, or we'd be sleeping on the floor. Sometimes too, not only would they ensure that we were sleeping in our beds, but they would make us do drill in our beds and then go to sleep. So it would just be, that little extra push to make you go, oh, the morning's gonna be terrible. It's gonna be extra panic in the morning.
And at 6 a.m. every morning, we'd have wake-up tunes. And normally the first song was quite a shocker. We'd all be lying in bed knowing it's 1 minute to 6, and then literally they had it turned up so loud you could hear them push the button on the stereo and click, pop as the sound started to play. And then just full blast music. Wake up recruits, let's go, get up, you have half an hour to be ready for inspection. And they have this whole list of tasks that you had to complete. Got to make the beds, got to shave, got to make sure everything is squared away properly, is the floor clean, is everything in perfect alignment, all the time while this music is playing.
Walls weren't walls, they were bulkheads, and ceilings weren't ceilings, they were deck heads, and the washrooms weren't washrooms, they were heads and wash places, and your room wasn't a room, it was a cabin. Your bed wasn't a bed, it was a bunk. So they, all the naval terminology that you experienced in the fleet, you were introduced to it here at Royal Roads, whether you were Army, Navy, or Air Force, didn't really matter. The daily lifestyle was the same as you'd find on board a ship, with colors at 8 o'clock in the morning with the raising of the Canadian flag, and sunset with the lowering of the Canadian flag.
Panic drills, panic tunes, doing square drill in the hallways, marching for shower parade. We'd be wearing our raincoats, marching in the hallways to go into the bathrooms. Square drill in the mess hall, sitting there and having to look straight ahead, not looking down at your plate. Etiquette was obviously an important aspect as well. And eating your food, square drill, so the fork straight up, into your mouth, down again.
We were no longer shuffling along in corridors with our hands in our pockets and sloped shoulders. We were already starting to get the instruction of the way we'd been walking up until then our whole lives wasn't the way to do it. And, that first day, had my hair cut. I can remember putting my ear on the pillow and knowing that I owned an ear. And I hadn't felt my ear on a pillow in quite some time.
As in, the shock of your life begins, and you got to remember this is kind of Vietnam War, and the next thing you lose all your hair. Then people getting upset about frost and how you make your room, and panic, recruits, panic! You can't get out of bed early to get prepared. No, you got to get up nobody out of bed before 6:30, and then ricochet around, and I was thinking, I could, in theory, be at university sort of, letting my hair grow long, sort of being inconspicuous, where there were girls and, people weren't upset about my personal appearance. But anyway.
We would have panic drills where you had to go into your room and in 2 minutes change out of one uniform and change into another uniform and stand out and be inspected. And then go back into your room and change from your scarlets to your fours or something else. Well, if you have if you're in breach and you've got your whites on your kit, it takes more than 2 minutes to change out of that uniform and change back in. So you're always late. You're never organized and prepared to be where you need to be. And the whole rest of your flight pays for it. They've got to do extra push-ups or sit-ups while they're waiting for you to get into your uniform to come back out.
During recruit term, I remember we had to walk around with a hot iron and we had to do drill, and you had to say, sorry. I can't, don't do that to me. Oh God, okay. What stands out? Well, one of the things that stands out is doing drill during recruit term, and I remember specifically doing square drill with a hot iron, where you had to walk down the hallway saying, "Excuse me, please, hot iron. Excuse me, please, hot iron," every second step. And so you're marching, you know, chest high, shoulder high, and walking around with a hot iron doing square drill, and it was just ridiculous things like that.
I was the first one charged. I was the first one to fail an exam. I was the first one to do all the bad things. And when I left Rhodes, I had one of the highest positions there, and highest positions academically as well. And then when I came here to Ottawa last year as a commander, and I saw one of my section commanders for recruit term. I was probably one of the youngest commanders in the military at this point. And he saw me in the cafeteria and he went, I said, "I know, it's scary. Like, I was your worst recruit ever, Mike." And he's like, "Yeah, you were." And he's like, "What the hell?"
And then, of course, the obstacle course at the end, where you had to go through with all of the members of your flight. Course at the time went right through the creek, so you're running uphill through this creek, down under logs and up over obstacles and crawling through the mud, and you're running up the hill all the time. And then the obstacle course, I think it went up behind the PMQ patch and then back down the hill, and you were crawling through muddy fields, and you know, there was you had to crawl under a gate or a portion of the fence just south of the commandant's house, and it was full of water.
The guys in my flight, they were so fantastic at helping us get through. For me, and for a lot of people, it was physically challenging. For the guys, it was like, ah! And I wish I could go back. I wish I could replay that myself and do it all over again, because now I just think of all the obstacles that we did and the physical aspect of it, how exciting. At the time, it was this grueling hurdle, physical hurdle to get over, to say, I've made it through recruit term, I belong here at this college.
Every day was practically a skylark with something going on. But I do remember one as a second year being done to me from the first years. And I don't remember exactly how it started, but I was in some sort of REM third phase sleep in the middle of the night, about 3 o'clock in the morning maybe, and a bunch of people burst into my room. And I remember just jumping up out of bed and looking at them, but I was so tired, I just laid back down. They thought I was going to fight them. Instead, they just wrestled me into a bag, and then I remember waking up in a trunk of a car. And as I woke up, I realized I was in there with 3 other guys. They piled us all in this trunk, and we were all kind of asleep. We all kind of woke up together. And we were summarily bound and gagged and rowed out to an island. It's a rock island in the middle of this lagoon. And there I found myself with about a dozen or so of the other second year parade barmen, we called them, because we had positions on parade, on the rock in our pajamas and underwear. And they rowed away and said, we'll come and get you one day.
Things like mattress races in the hallways, where you'd take 2 guys at one end of the hallway, each with a mattress, and like a demolition derby car wreck, you'd run towards each other, and you couldn't see each other because you held a mattress in front of you, and so there'd be this unexpected collision, usually about halfway down the hallway. The person that was strongest and able to stand on their feet the longest and get to the other end with their mattress was the winner.
We had I'd call it a healthy relationship with University of Victoria. We spoke about skylarks, and before the very first football game, we, under cover of darkness, went out and took the line machine and wrote RRMC right across the whole span of the football field. They came back and stole one of our small cannons. We kidnapped the student union president, put him out on the rock in the lagoon for a night, complete with bed and lighting and whatever else.
I was living right across the hallway from two guys. I was not the instigator of this, but okay, for some reason I came up with the stupidest idea of me being photographer. They would strip down to their underwear. Seriously, I know it's embarrassing, but you know, I would take the pictures because down the hallway, the senior class had a drill class going on. And we just wanted to see if we could get away with it. If they could strip down to their underwear, run, tag one of the other doors, come back in time before that class was finished so that nobody would see them doing it, just to see if we could get away with it. I don't know why.
And I'm sure you've heard of grunching by now. So where you go and you basically gang up on someone and strip them down to almost nothing and smear them with really stinky, gross things or throw them in the lake or in the lagoon or whatever. It was, I'm not exactly sure what the point of that was, to be honest. People got graunched for their birthdays, they got graunched if it was a special occasion, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure how we picked our targets, but so those are some of the weirdest things that I would never have seen myself participating in 100 years.
You know, some second year who had been particularly annoying, who had a little MG car, no names, no pactrol, that sat outside the dormitory, and he seemed to be living like a king. And so get up in the middle of the night, and as a group, quietly steal downstairs, take that MG apart, bring it inside the front doors of the dormitory, and put it back together again in the lobby, which took us 4.5 hours. Which meant nobody slept that night because you weren't getting any more than about 4.5 or 5 hours. And so still believing that it was necessary. You had to fight back. You know, you had to maintain some control of your life. And so everybody up doing, you know, what we refer to as a skylark. It makes no sense. But I learned more about human nature and about the value of relationships in the first 6 weeks of Royal Roads than I learned since. And so, but I didn't know I was learning it at the time.
It would be in pairs, you would be in some silly costume, and you would have to slow march down the stairs out of Nixon Block and announce how many days there were till Christmas leave. And the whole time you're being pelted with water balloons, water coming out of garden hoses. And this is December, so even though it's Victoria, the weather is still a little bit chilly.
I should also mention that one day I walked into the class and all 99 of them sitting in this tiered theater were sitting there with Groucho Marx noses, mustaches, and glasses on.
Probably the one that was the most notorious was when we painted the UVic copper dome. It was at the Student Union building. We had the guys go up, they took the ladder, they got up, you know, a couple of stories onto the top where the copper dome is, and they painted RRMC #1 along the copper. And it was great because it actually made it to UVic's newspaper. So I guess the president of UVic was extremely unhappy about this and called the commandant and was, you know, angry as all get out because, oh, this copper dome, and they painted it with white paint, and we had to spend $1,000 to get it sandblasted off and so forth. So what the commandant apparently said, because of course we heard this through the chain, that what had happened, the commandant basically said, well, if you had called earlier, we would have told you A, that the paint was water soluble, and B, if you wanted the cadets responsible to clean it up, I would have sent them over. Good day, sir. So we heard nothing more about it.
And so enduring memory, too much to do, not enough time to do it in, tired, having to manage that exhaustion level and manage the throughput of things that you needed to get done, and yet being part of that group, there was no option. And it wasn't because you were compelled by the group. There was no personal option of laying in your bed when that skylark was going on. You were going to be a part of that. You know, that wasn't going on without you getting to add your piece to it. And so learning that that bond of cohesion is the way that you were going to get through. Nobody could do this on their own. It wasn't possible.
So we were the last class that we had no lady cadets on parade. We had no UTPM, University Training Plan for men on parade. We were all scarlet, all male. It was very unique, and it was the last one. Now, I'm not going to start, pumping my fist about that. I ended up marrying a lady cadet about 2 years later, but at the time we were pretty pumped about that.
Yes, that was a painful experience. It was a painful experience for the young ladies in question for a number of reasons. First of all, many of the male students, somewhat surprisingly, did not welcome the idea of female students at Royal Roads. And that may seem counterintuitive in a way, but I think that they saw Royal Roads as very much their own community, and they felt that the dynamic would change, and indeed it did change.
If anything, maybe it was jealousy. The ladies had the limelight then, and they were the story and we weren't.
The lifestyle here was extremely demanding. It was a sort of intellectual boot camp, and for a number of these young women, it was a huge challenge. It's not to suggest that it wasn't for some of the male students as well, but the women, being a tiny minority, felt, I think, particularly beleaguered.
I remember knitting in my room and somebody going, and you're not allowed in your room without marching, and I'm knitting. I don't know why I'm knitting, but knitting a yellow sweater, I still remember, and some guy going back going, "Cadets don't knit, recruit, Kevin." I wasn't a recruit, I wouldn't have been knitting at that point, but first, cadets don't knit. And I remember thinking, well, I guess I do. Okay, well, do I put that away or do I knit? And I sewed. Maybe I was trying too hard to try to do girl things that I had done beforehand to try to prove I haven't lost it altogether. I haven't turned into a guy yet.
I think the relationship with the women is something that changes with each person as they kind of matured. We probably tolerated a level of kind of just inherent sexism that we wouldn't tolerate today.
As a whole, I think it was a lot more challenging to be a female cadet at military college, and a lot more of us came out with scars from it. My peers and I were top academics, top sports, top cadets, top leaders in our communities before we arrived. So it's not like we were the bottom of the crop. We were the top of the crop that they were bringing in, and yet somehow the system was set up so that a lot of us were being treated as if we were not worthwhile.
But then again, there was lots of strong camaraderie amongst everybody, and a lot of the time the guys were very protective of the women in their flight. So as recruits, you would help the slowest person along, regardless of who they were. Often it was a woman, and people would just kind of rally around them.
As with anything, when you're in a minority situation, you probably find that you don't just want to get by, or it's not simply acceptable for you to get by. You need to do better than everybody else, almost. I know a lot of the male cadets that I went through with had a much easier time of sort of rolling with the punches or blowing it off. A lot of the female cadets, it was definitely something that they took personally and internalized as their experiences, and not necessarily for the best.
I'd say that the experience over time is something that became more normal, and that, let's say, the norms or standards of behavior improved, but in 1984 we were still learning.
Bit by bit, as the 80s wore on, the pool from which we drew, I think, became broader. The students were more adept, I think, more accustomed to having female students. Female students, in fact, were here long enough that they really became integrated, because we were a four-year college, into the program. And there were some absolutely stellar young women who went to Royal Roads. But at the very beginning, for the first couple of years, I think it was extremely difficult, and we probably asked or expected too much of the first one or two cohorts of women who came to the college. But like the older non-commissioned officers who came, this was a move in the right direction. It was a leavening effect which broadened the horizons, increased the general levels of gentility and so on.
There was never any point where I felt disadvantaged because I was a woman. The only points that I have felt disadvantaged is not because of my gender, but because of my size.
We had people that arrived here that their right foot and their right arm seemed to be clutched together, and that's not the way you're supposed to march. They were going to teach you how to do that. Down there on the parade square, you learn how to salute, you learn how to line up, you learn how to march, you learn how to fast march, slow march. Then there was the rifle drill and all of the things associated with both a rifle and a sword drill.
Yes, we had to march across the quarterdeck. Everywhere else we had to run. We had to salute the quarterdeck as we came onto it. A lot of Navy tradition, of course, was applied, and you'd forget to salute once, and that'd cause you to be placed on charge or given circles to run or something. So it was always something that you had to be aware of. Sharpens the mind, I'll tell you.
So my social life was within the gang we were, and well, that's where the bonding comes from. Work hard, play hard. Work hard is at school, everybody does that, and play hard is both on the sports field and going downtown dressed up like the little monkey on the chain with the pillbox in bars. And in Victoria, unlike in Kingston, they're not that used to seeing cadets in bars with their, at that time I think it was called threes. It's the blue high collar with the pillbox and cape. And certainly there were some bars that everybody turned and looked at you, but others they understood who you were and where you came from.
Later on in first year and into second year, you could actually wear a blazer with, yes, we were allowed to wear blue shirts. That was quite something, not white shirts, and gray flannel trousers. So you looked very preppy, but you could walk around downtown Victoria in that. You didn't quite feel such an oddball.
But we did stand out, because then we had short hair. We wouldn't stand out today, because a lot of people have short hair. But I mean, accepting tips as a porter at the Empress Hotel because somebody thought that you were going to carry their bags because you were wearing uniform. Hey, I mean, you could look at that two ways. You could either pocket the $1 that they gave you, or you could tell them you were at Royal Roads. And it was probably a function of how much money you had in your pocket, which one you did.
When we started here, they brought in the tailors who actually make the scarlets, and I still remember us being sort of herded up to the top of the castle in the cute little tailor's office, tucked away one by one, measured and fitted for our original, made-to-measure scarlets. And there was the adjustment that the buttons go on the other side. All of our scarlets here were custom made for the first class, which was really neat. It was kind of see these beautiful, pristine, and yet you partly thought, well, there's such history with wearing somebody else's scarlets. And again, once in a while, I think you'd hear a wisecrack comment from a guy, oh, we have to wear these hand-me-down ones, and you guys get new ones. Yeah, I mean, there was some of that. And they have reason to be upset by some of those things as well, too, because it did single us out from them, and we didn't want that. We didn't want to be singled out. We want to fit in, blend. As a guy, you can go out there, and some of the girls from U of Vic would think, well, that's kind of a novelty, or that's kind of neat, or isn't he cute in his uniform? But I could not expect any guy down there looking at us going, wow, that's hot. Yeah.
I would say that the staff were rather an eclectic mix. You had, for example, we had an English professor who came from UVic, who would be seen probably as the classic flower child, long hair, talked in a very soft, flowing voice, would be quite often late to teach his class because he was all the time coming from Victoria. Very nice man, but about as far as you can get away from being military. Well, he was our English teacher for the first term. The second term, we had an Army major who taught us English, who had a waxed handlebar mustache, spit-shine combat boots, and his trousers were more highly pressed than those of the cadets.
Dr. Boutillier in particular, it was fascinating to watch him give you a lecture without any notes, just sitting, much like I am right now, leaning on a desk, perchance, going through, a World War II battle, and he would end the lesson and on June 6th, that's how the day concluded. And then the weekend might go by, and then he would walk in on the Monday or the Tuesday or whenever the next class was, and he'd go, on June 7th, without notes, and just provide this absolutely illuminating lecture to the class. It was great. Dr. Rodney, of course, Master Mariner, was also very memorable in the sense of being Welsh and the like. And Mr. Cloyd, glad to see you could join us today. And then Dr. Martel, who came back after a year sabbatical and says, Mr. Lloyd, third year, it's good to see you, because all I remember from first year is the part down the center of your head as you slept through class.
The professors, I mean, they had a difficult job, because a lot of us, when the academics started, I mean, it was hard to stay awake. We fell asleep a lot in class. There was, of course, military leadership and management, and there were double periods, and they'd bring a double class for a double period, and it was a race to get to the to the last row of chairs, because there was extra leg room, and you could really slouch. And a double period meant there was an uninterrupted hour and a half of sleep. And this is where we really enjoyed having the UTPM's, the University Training Plan for Men, because they always stayed awake. They were always interested, and they always asked questions. And it was like the prof was dealing with them in the front rows, and the rest of us were very grateful that they were engaged, so we could just sleep for the period.
In those days, I'm going back to the mid-70s, Royal Roads had the reputation of being the toughest of all three military colleges. That was CMR, RMC, and Royal Roads. People at RMC might well, take issue with that, but at the time, Royal Roads was looked upon as being much more military and hard discipline. So yes, in the first year, we usually lost about half the people we started with, sometimes more. So we came in here with upwards of, well, probably 150, 160, and by the end of the year, you're down less than 100. Then a few more left every year after that. That was sort of the degree of, attrition in those days.
I'm a big sports enthusiast, and I went there and didn't realize just how much sports was a part of the military college system. It's a full 1/3 of your life. The other third being academics, a third being military, and notice there's no time in there for sleep. It was everything from, soccer to swimming events, competitive swimming events, and water polo, table tennis and real tennis and basketball and volleyball, name it. And everybody played. It was kind of like a college of all-stars. There were very few people who couldn't play at least one sport very well. Sometimes people couldn't even kick a soccer ball, but if you put a sword in their hand, they were a fencing expert. There was always somebody who could do something with a great skill.
Back in my day, those that had any skill at all playing a trumpet were the duty buglers, and your responsibility was 24 hours. And it started in the morning at about 6 o'clock, going to each of the 6 hallways, standing at the end of the hallway and playing Wakey Wakey, which was a little tune you played on your trumpet, sometimes very poorly. And you quickly learned to play it quickly and duck because it wasn't real popular amongst those who you were waking up.
I would say a lot of the memorable times are related to socializing and friends, whether it was Oktoberfest, the Spring Fest, the Christmas Ball, the Spring Ball, sports competitions, whether they were intramural competitions, varsity. We had the opportunity to play a lot of sports that I never would have ever been involved in before. We had European team handball, golf, wrestling. My varsity sports that I enjoyed playing were volleyball and field hockey.
When you would see folks who were obviously starting to give way under the pressure, you move them to the center. It was like, the buffalo or the bison when they go into that circle and defend the herd. That group cohesion and the absolute necessity of understanding that the success that you were going to have was predicated upon teamwork is the most enduring experience that I brought out of Royal Roads.
My heart is there. That is the only place in this world that I have ever gone where I just feel calm. Just, I'm here and it's safe. You know, to walk down to the Japanese gardens and sit in the gazebo and just chill out for an hour, looking at the cherry blossoms, listen to the peacocks always, like, oh, here they go again, it's mating season, just in time for exams. We were lucky. We were very, very lucky people.
I have an affinity for Japanese gardens. I just don't know. I find it so calming and they're so beautiful, and I could go there and just take a breath and relax. I don't think you could find that at any other university.
I remember having lectures outside in the spring semester. You know, it'd be March, end of March or early April, and it'd be a gorgeous day outside. And on more than one occasion, the prof would be like, okay, we're going to go sit in the Italian gardens today and have our class. So we'd be sitting outside, and the prof would be in the chair, and we'd be giving a lecture in this amazing garden, and it's warm in springtime, and thinking, you know, this isn't so bad, you know, to be sitting outside in a class and you know, enjoying the nature.
Everybody had an investment in that place. Everybody did. Whether they worked there, you know, as a clerk, as a cleaner, as a gardener, as a professor, as a military member. There was a culture there that just was, wow, we get to work here. We get to work here, and we're lucky to work here. So how does the attachment grow? The sensual experience of living there, the people and the staff, all of whom gave their heart and soul to their jobs. Even the gardeners, I mean, they took such great pride in their work. You could smell and feel and see the effort that people put in to creating Royal Roads as a military college.
I learned pretty quickly the importance of respecting elders, doing a task when it's assigned to you, and realizing that if you fall behind or do anything that compromises your abilities to participate in the team, you've actually compromised the team as well. So you learn to toe the line, follow orders, carry out what needs to be done, and if you don't, you pay the consequences, and so does everybody else around you, and that's not a good way to make friends.
Well, I'm sure you'll find most people saying that, you know, it teaches us integrity, honesty, how to be true to the concepts of truth, duty, valor. So truth, duty, honesty. Honesty, integrity, loyalty. You know, it's all those concepts that you can't teach, you have to live it. And we lived it for 4 years.
Even today, I can get up and as soon as the alarm goes off, I can be dressed and shaved and ready to go in 20 minutes. It's those old habits that die really hard.
Did it teach me how to be a ship's captain and that sort of thing? Absolutely not, but it taught me the fundamentals of being an officer in the military.
But I'll tell you, that phrase that I didn't know, that I had to go back and learn again, burned into my psyche. Duty is a great business of a sea officer. All private considerations must give way to it, however painful it is. Admiral Nelson, and I have never forgotten that to this day.
It's those initial impressions against which you compare, you know, how you saw the institution when you got to the end of 4 years. And to some degree, how I have seen that as a preparation for the things I've done, you know, in the forces after that. But you know, the enduring memories somehow are of being tired, exhausted in some cases, of having far too much to do and not enough time to do it in. And it was obvious to any reasonable person, you can't possibly get all these things done in the amount of time that you're giving us. Okay, which, you know, I didn't realize at the time that what you were learning was, okay, that's life. Prioritize. Not everything has the same value in its output.
nothing that I will ever face will be as challenging or as difficult as mill call was, based on what we knew at the time when we were going through that. And that has definitely given me the strength, the skills, and the friendship to be able to have a really successful military career. I don't regret one day or 1 minute, and the memories that I have in looking back are going to be with me for a lifetime, and I cherish each one of them.
Some of the most enduring friendships of my life are the guys that I met on that bus. It was a pretty tough place. You had to measure yourself against a high standard. My wife would make the comment about the one thing I've never learned to do is set realistic targets. That's right. The targets we set at Royal Roads were not realistic. You couldn't achieve them. Yeah, it wasn't in the achievement. It was in the effort that you expended in getting as far down that road as you could get. And so, you know, I've always said, no, I don't want people setting realistic targets. I want them setting targets they really need to stretch for. And you may not get the whole way there, but you'll get lots of the way down that road. That's a lifestyle. I didn't know that it was being ingrained in me the moment by moment, drip by drip, that it was being poured in. But, you know, they're not bad ways to choose to set goals for yourself for the rest of your life. That's Royal Roads.
But sad occasion in the history of Royal Roads Military College. For today we will be trooping the colors for the last time on this parade square, a pad of concrete which we who have been cadets respect and know only too well.
Devastated. Up in arms, outraged. We couldn't believe, how could they close this place? How could they do that? And it was very emotional. Graduation was really important for me, but I was the last grad year. I remember getting my diploma, my degree, and thinking, I got through this. I made it, and I've got my commission. That was really important. That was great, that was fun. You know, the parade, the graduation parade, the ceremony for our degrees, that was important. Those two things almost paled in comparison to the closure parade.
We looked around and there were guys with tears in their eyes, and you know, oh geez. And it kind of hit home, like, this is it, it's over. And kind of said, you know, it can't be over, there's going to be another parade or something. But no, it sort of hit home, and I said, you know, this is a loss for Canada. So that's how you felt at the end, regrettably.
It seemed to be impossible that this place wouldn't exist as a military place anymore. I remember when it actually did close, one of the songs that they played was Highland Cathedral, and I was one of the flag bearers. I think I was on the New Brunswick flag on the parade square, and I had to like choke back tears because it was just such a moving and such a powerful song. And so now whenever I hear that song on the bagpipes, I have to really still do get emotional. It's just, to me, that signifies standing on the parade square at the very last day that Royal Roads was our RMC, and it was really, really sad.
glad to hear that refurbishments are happening, and Royal Roads has taken a great interest in the history of that college prior to it being a university, of refurbishing the quarterdeck, reminiscent of what the flooring was like to start with, doing walls of honor, putting up the flagstaff, maybe not in the same location, but bringing back the bell and making it a centerpiece. I think that's important, because when we lose history, we lose a sense of our own identity.